My name is Sarah, and there's one moment seared into my memory forever. The day my husband, Ronald, stood tall in a Chicago courtroom and spat out the words, "She never contributed anything worthwhile." The cruelty in his voice sliced through me like glass. 7 years of sacrifice, erased in a single sentence. 7 years of juggling multiple jobs, skipping meals, funneling every penny into his dream of creating a tech empire, dismissed as nothing. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see if I would collapse under the weight of his betrayal. Behind Ronald, his mother, Vivian, sat with a smug tilt of her chin, her eyes saying what she'd always believed, that I had never been good enough for her son. But I wasn't there to shatter. My hands trembled, yes, but my voice didn't. "Your Honor," I said, steady and clear. "I'd like to submit this prenuptial agreement, signed in Florence." The audible gasp from Ronald's side of the room was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, had led me to this moment. But to understand how I ended up here, you need to know where it all began. It was a stifling summer night in Chicago. I was 28, attending a networking event in a sleek loft downtown. The room buzzed with clinking glasses, polished laughter, and the hum of young professionals climbing their ladders of ambition. At the time, I was a financial analyst at Sterling Partners, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. My corner office overlooked the glimmer of Lake Michigan, and just that morning, my boss had told me I'd been chosen for the firm's executive fast-track program, a rare opportunity for someone my age. "You're going places, Sarah," he'd said warmly, clapping my shoulder. And I had believed him. I had worked for every inch of that moment. Growing up in a modest suburb, my mother teaching elementary school and my father repairing cars, money was always tight. I'd fought tooth and nail for a scholarship, clawed my way through college, determined to rewrite the story of my family's financial struggles. Finance had become my vehicle to security, maybe even success on a grand scale. That night in the loft, I felt on the brink of something extraordinary. And then, across the crowded room, I saw Ronald. He was magnetic. His easy grin, his animated hands, the way people leaned toward him as he spoke, it was impossible not to notice. He was passionately pitching his idea for a tech startup, Apex Innovations. His dream? To revolutionize inventory management for small businesses with smarter, streamlined software. The way he talked about algorithms, market gaps, and a future that seemed just within reach, it drew me in before I even realized it. Later, on the balcony with cheap wine in hand, his voice softened. "The real problem is funding," he confessed. "Investors don't believe in a guy like me with just an improvement idea." Something in his honesty hooked me. Beneath his bravado, I saw a dreamer, someone reaching for something bigger than himself. And I wanted to believe with him. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. One morning, when his aging laptop, the very core of his coding work, died completely, he looked devastated. He couldn't afford a replacement. Without hesitation, I pulled out my credit card and bought him a new one. He kissed me, eyes alight, and said, "You're not just buying this laptop, you're investing in us. I'll make it worth it, Sarah." And I believed him. 6 months into our relationship, Ronald quit his stable IT job to focus on Apex full-time. His savings disappeared quickly. The investor meetings he chased went nowhere. One by one, the bills started piling up, and I began covering not only my own expenses, but his rent, his car, his groceries. He reassured me it was just temporary, murmuring promises over late-night meals of instant noodles in our cramped apartment. His conviction was enough to silence my doubts. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. But not long after, I faced a choice that could have altered everything. Sterling offered me the chance to spend a year in their London office as part of the executive program, a golden ticket to senior management. My career could have skyrocketed. Ronald never asked me outright to stay, but the slump of his shoulders, the quiet weight in his sighs, spoke volumes. He needed me, and so I turned down London. I told myself I was choosing love, choosing our future. 2 weeks later, my position at Sterling was, I lost my job when the company restructured, a polite way of saying I was no longer needed. That night, I collapsed into Ronald's arms, my future dissolving in tears. He stroked my back and whispered, maybe it's a sign. You can help me build Apex. We'll do this together. I wanted to believe him. So I did. The years that followed blurred into fatigue and fragile hope. To keep Ronald's dream alive, I took an administrative assistant job at a medical office, earning half of what I used to. When the paycheck still fell short, I added weekend shifts at Rosie's Diner, serving greasy plates to hungover students and weary truckers. Some nights I drove strangers around the city for a rideshare app, the smell of stale coffee clinging to the seats. Every so often, an old colleague from Sterling would slide into my back seat, their small talk tinged with awkward pity. Sarah, I thought you were on track for the C-suite, one said once. Her words cut sharper than the Chicago cold. I smiled weakly, muttered something about supporting Ronald's startup, then changed the subject. Inside, I wanted to scream. At home, Ronald lived in front of glowing screens, coding until dawn. He surfaced only for coffee, talking about breakthroughs and meetings with investors that never seemed to lead anywhere. Meanwhile, I bent our budget in impossible ways, covering server fees, prototypes, software licenses, anything he needed to keep going. My family didn't understand. One rare afternoon, my sister held my hand across a cafe table. You're killing yourself for his dream, not yours, she warned. I waved her off, but her words stayed with me. Vivian, Ronald's mother, was worse. From the day we met, she regarded me like I was dirt beneath her shoes. At our tiny courthouse wedding, where she was the only witness, her brittle smile said more than words. I would never be good enough. She'd watch me in my diner uniform and murmur, Ronald needs someone who recognizes his brilliance. Each jab sank deep, but I swallowed my pride, reminding myself I was sacrificing for our future. Then came Florence. Ronald had secured a meeting with an Italian investor, and they even covered our travel expenses. I saw it as a blessing, a chance to escape, even briefly. But while Ronald spent his days locked in meetings, I wandered the city alone, sipping espresso at outdoor cafes and marveling at cobblestone streets. One night, after Ronald drank too much celebrating a pitch, I sat in a cafe with an American expat who noticed the strain etched across my face. She leaned closer and said quietly, "You're bankrolling his dream. Protect yourself." She introduced me to a local lawyer, Signor Rossi, who drafted a contract acknowledging my financial sacrifices and granting me 49% of Apex. The next evening, I slipped the papers into a pile of investor documents. Ronald, euphoric and distracted, signed without looking twice. He raised his glass and toasted, "To our future," never realizing what he had just agreed to. Back in Chicago, the routine resumed. I worked myself raw, Ronald coded, and slowly Apex began to catch fire. A client here, a beta test there, the kindling of something real. But as the company grew, Ronald pulled further away from me. He hired Lauren, a polished MBA with sharp eyes and a colder smile. She managed his schedule, his calls, his every need with unnerving precision. And soon enough, Vivian was back in the picture, circling more often, offering her unsolicited advice, and acting as though I had never been part of the story at all. I was always on the sidelines, quietly giving advice on everything from branding choices to how the office should look. Still, I felt invisible in my own life, like a ghost whose sacrifices blurred into the background while Ronald's career kept climbing higher. By the time Apex landed its first major client, our marriage was only a hollow shell. Ronald stayed late at the office, always blaming deadlines, while I carried the weight of multiple jobs and the sting of Vivian's constant barbs. "You wouldn't understand the business side," she'd tell me whenever I dared to ask about a decision, her tone laced with mockery. Lauren wasn't much kinder. At one company event, she greeted me with a detached smile and said, "Oh, so you're Ronald's wife. He doesn't really talk about home." Her words stung deeply. I stood there in a clearance rack dress, balancing a tray of appetizers I had managed to make between shifts, while Lauren floated around in sleek designer clothes. Meanwhile, Ronald began indulging in little luxuries, finely tailored suits, a shiny new watch, a haircut that cost more than what I earned in tips for a week. He brushed it off with "client impressions matter," barely sparing me a glance. I was still wearing thrifted outfits and driving a car that rattled at every stoplight. When the company upgraded to a polished new office in Chicago's Loop, the walls were filled with photos. Ronald with investors, Ronald at conferences, Ronald accepting awards. My bookkeeping, my financial support, my sacrifices, erased as if I'd never existed. One night, too exhausted to make dinner, I drifted to sleep on the couch waiting for Ronald. His phone buzzed, left behind in his rush. A message flashed on the screen. Lauren, dinner at Giovanni's tonight. Your favorite table. My chest tightened as I scrolled through more messages. Late night chats, inside jokes, compliments about his sharp suit. When I confronted him, he waved it off. She's my assistant, Sarah. She's doing her job. You're overreacting. His voice, once filled with warmth, was now clipped and dismissive. He called me emotional, irrational. The man who had once trusted my financial sense now treated me like I was a weight around his neck. My birthday passed unnoticed. Our anniversary faded into nothing. When Apex was featured in Chicago Business Magazine, not a single mention was made of me, the woman who had emptied her savings to keep it alive. Instead, the article praised Ronald, Lauren, and Vivian, all smiling together in the office I had helped build. When I brought it up, Ronald didn't even look away from his laptop. It's about the business, not you. The breaking point came while I was paying bills on his laptop, still my responsibility, despite the company's success. A minimized document caught my eye, a lease agreement for a luxury condo in River North, effective immediately. My heart sank. That night, Ronald came home late, reeking of perfume. This isn't working, he said, his tone flat. We want different things. 2 days later, he packed his things. 3 weeks after that, while I was on a shift at the diner, divorce papers arrived. The settlement offered was insulting, barely a fraction of the years I'd invested. When I called Ronald, it was Vivian who answered. Her voice carried a smug edge. You should be grateful for his offer. What did you ever really do, besides play support staff? By the time we reached the courtroom, the air itself felt suffocating. I sat next to Rachel Cohen, my attorney, wearing a second-hand suit that hung loose on my tired frame. Rachel's sharp eyes scanned the room with steady confidence, grounding me while I felt small and outnumbered. Across the aisle, Ronald's legal team, for attorneys from one of Chicago's top firms, sat like a wall of expensive fabric and smug certainty. Lauren was there too, her navy dress deliberately professional, as if to erase any whispers of her true role. Vivian, in pearls and a cream suit, angled herself protectively beside Ronald, her gaze slicing straight through me. Judge Margaret Hayes entered, a stern, seasoned woman in her 60s. Ronald's lead attorney, James Whitaker, began with a smooth, polished narrative. He painted Ronald as the visionary genius who had built Apex Innovations from nothing, a man now offering me an overly generous settlement that I had unreasonably refused. When it was Rachel's turn, her voice carried calm authority. My client was critical in the creation of Apex. This so-called settlement disregards years of her labor and contributions. Whitaker called Ronald to the stand, guiding him through a story of struggle and triumph, his struggle, his triumph. Then he turned to me. Miss Sarah, he asked, his tone calculated, what exactly was your role at Apex? Ronald answered for me, his voice cold and sharp. She worked odd jobs, waitressing. The words cut like a knife. 7 years of sacrifice, dismissed in a single sentence. The courtroom air felt heavy, each word from Ronald's side pressing down on me. They painted my 7 years of sacrifice as little more than errands, driving, odd bookkeeping, scraps of effort. Vivian's approving nod from the gallery burned into me like a brand. When my turn came, Whitaker's questions dripped with disdain cloaked as pity. You make $43,000 a year across 3 jobs, correct? Quite a fall from your finance career. Was money the reason you married Ronald? Rachel shot up. Objection argumentative. The judge sustained it, but the damage had already landed. Their story was clear. Ronald, the noble provider. Me, the burden. Then Vivian took the stand. With her pearls gleaming and her voice soaked in practiced regret, she delivered her lines. Sarah was never invested. She cared about comfort, not Ronald's vision. Every syllable chipped at me, casting me as a bystander, a leech, when I bled for apex. By the afternoon, their false narrative had nearly drowned me. I leaned toward Rachel, whispering, I can't listen to more of this. It's time for the prenup. Her eyes hardened with resolve. She nodded. As Whitaker began his closing, Ronald interrupted, his tone sharp. Your Honor, I built Apex. Sarah only wants my money. She never truly contributed. The courtroom fell into silence so thick it echoed. Vivian's smug tapping on the bench made it worse. I rose, legs trembling, but my voice didn't falter. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this prenup. Signed in Florence. Rachel handed the manila envelope to Judge Hayes. His brow lifted as he examined the notarized document, Ronald's signature clearly visible. Whitaker stiffened, scrambling. Your Honor, we had no knowledge of this. Its legitimacy is questionable. Rachel cut in, her tone firm. This agreement, signed on their honeymoon, grants my client 49% of Apex Innovations, acknowledging both her financial contributions and sweat equity. The room erupted with whispers. Ronald went pale, hissing frantic words to Whitaker. Vivian clutched her pearls like they could shield her from the truth. Judge Hayes rapped the gavel, silencing the chaos. Mr. Ronald, do you recognize your signature? He stammered. I signed something in Florence, but I wasn't fully aware. There was wine. The judge's stare was razor sharp. You met with investors that day, didn't you? Were you impaired then? My voice cut through. He was clear enough to secure our first round of funding. Judge Hayes studied the document before nodding. For the next 30 minutes, Rachel laid it all out. Every dollar I poured into the business, every job I worked, every night I sacrificed. Slowly, the room's view of me shifted. I wasn't a parasite. I was a co-founder. At last, Judge Hayes' voice rang steady. The prenup is valid. Sarah owns 49% of Apex Innovations and its assets. The motion for spousal support is denied, as her ownership makes it unnecessary. The parties will enter mediation to determine structure or negotiate a buyout. Ronald's lawyers deflated. Vivian froze mid-clutch, her pearls useless now. Lauren kept her gaze on the floor. I felt no victory, only a hollow ache. 7 years of sacrifice reduced to percentages. Betrayal couldn't be erased by a ruling. Outside, reporters swarmed. Sarah, how does it feel to be Apex's hidden partner? Before I could answer, Ronald spoke sharply. This is private. We'll handle it professionally. I met his eyes, my voice calm, unwavering. I've been silent too long. Apex was built on partnership. Whatever its future, my role is undeniable. For the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming my voice. Months later, after tense negotiations, Ronald bought me out. The settlement became seed money for something new. Sarah's Financial Solutions, a consultancy helping women entrepreneurs secure funding and protect their stakes. My small office in downtown Chicago felt like a rebirth. One evening, my assistant delivered Lily's with a note. Congrats on the ink feature. You earned it. E. The article credited me for Apex's rise while celebrating my new venture. I kept the flowers but left the note unanswered. Some stories are better left closed. Over dinner with friends who had stood by me through it all, I laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in years. The crushing weight of being invisible was gone. I wasn't just the woman behind Ronald's empire. I was Sarah, building my own. And to those who followed my journey, thank you. You've walked beside me through sacrifice, betrayal, and renewal. Every fight, every choice, every triumph carries its own heartbeat. Keep chasing yours. I'll see you at the finish line.